Everybody, welcome back to Final Resonance TV in episode number 55 of Van Halen Stories. Today, my guest is Bad Brad Henderson, all the way from Florida today. You guys might know Bad Brad's awesome YouTube channel. If you don't, just look up Bad Brad and you'll find him really easy, like I just did today, and watch some of his great videos on his career in music and his advice about music. Some really interesting stories that I love to listen to because they're so familiar to most of us that have been in the business for a long time. But Brad's also a big Van Halen fan. He actually was in LA back in the 80s, played at the Whiskey, played at Cabo Wabo, did a number of things. And it's awesome to have you finally on here. I've loved your channel and been watching it for a while. So thanks for coming on, man.
Man, it's my pleasure. And as we were talking before, you've inspired me to move forward with the channel. So, man, thank you very much. And I'm glad to be here.
Well, YouTube is a funny thing, but it's sort of like, the more authentic you can come across, the more that it grows. And you've kind of grown on me because you are so authentic. When you talk, it's just so funny and fun to listen to. That's what I appreciate. I laughed my ass off earlier today listening to you talk about all this stuff, all these different stories and things. I like this. Yeah. So hits the mark. And I even sent one of the last videos to my entire band. I said, you guys need to watch Brad's video here, because this is a great video all about what we already kind of know, but it's nice to hear someone else articulate it like you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, it seems like there's so many people out there. And I tell people this, that there's a very rarefied air of the Dan Huffs and Tom Bukovacs and Tim Pierce and those guys, and those are like the 1% of musicians. And then there's guys like you and me who have been in the trenches slugging it out, and you may be getting close to the brass ring and doing all these things. And those stories everybody can relate to, because there's so many more of us than there are the guys at the top. I mean, I love listening to all those guys, but at the same time, there's a lot of us out there who have a very different experience of being in the trenches and really, from the bottom on up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the way that you articulate it through your different your walk and talk, like you said earlier, but also your other talks are so interesting. Plus you do a lot of demos on your videos too. And you do equipment demos. Like I told him earlier off camera, you guys, that he inspired me to get the Pod Express, the original one, but I have that it's actually out my box.
I don't have mine anymore. So
you didn't? Okay. Well, I got the Pod Express, and I put a video out about it. I was telling him that rivals some very expensive gear if you put some time into it. And then, of course, the Tonex I just got too. So this is kind of cool because Jim Gosstead, who was on this channel, put all the Van Halen sounds together.
Yeah. Those do sound amazing. Everything. It sounds incredible. And I've got the Synergy, which you can kind of see right there. Right. That's what I've been using pretty much for everything now. I've got about 4 different modules, and I just plug in a different module depending on what style of music I got to play, and I'm really, really enjoying that. But I'm probably going to check out the modeling thing again when the new Helix Stadium comes out.
That's pretty cool, right? I'm excited to look at that too, yeah.
Yeah, I want to try that.
Yeah, it's got some really neat features in it that we've never really seen before, which are really cool. So yeah. Let's go back to your kind of like your days as a child when you first started playing. How old were you?
Oh man, probably. I'm just guessing, man, 8 or 9 or 10 or somewhere around then. I was just a little kid, and I started really young, and you start with cowboy chords and all that. But the interesting thing was my first guitar teacher basically taught me one lesson and then called my mom and said he'll never be able to play guitar. And my mom comes in. This guy just called and said you'll never be able to play. What do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I guess we got to get another teacher, right? But it's just and it's crazy to think that it was the Mel Bay one single note at a time, this, kind of thing. And I wanted to play what I was hearing on early rock and roll records. I wanted to play Chuck Berry tunes and Elvis and the 50s rock that I was into it when I was a little kid. So that's what got me into guitar, is hearing that early rock and roll stuff, and that's sort of, an easy thing you can kind of start learning.
Right.
You can learn Chuck Berry, and that Chuck Berry carried you so far. I mean, even up to Van Halen,
Hmm.
you really got me. How does that solo start?
Yep.
With a Chuck Berry lick. It's
Right.
almost like, look, I'm going to show you where rock and roll's been, and now I'm going to take it to the next level.
That's a good point. That's the thing about, you really got me in it. It's such a, like I said to somebody else about another song, I forgot what it was. Oh, Helter Skelter, how that had been covered multiple times, and how, the Beatles version. Then you listen to Pat Benatar did it, and she did a really great version of it. And then Motley Crue did it, and that evolution of those songs and how they changed through each evolution, and how you really got me was, so, from the Kinks version to that was
Yeah.
which is such a jump
Yeah.
sonically, and
Oh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
just, yeah, when we heard that sound, it was like, oh my lord, that
Yeah.
was it. So you get into music through early rock and roll. When do you discover bands like Van Halen? Is this prior? You're my age, right? You're about what, 57?
I'm 59.
Okay, a little bit older.
So, yeah, I mean, I got into the 50s stuff, and then I started drifting into Rolling Stones, and then got into Jimi Hendrix. So I was really into Jimi Hendrix, totally into that. Like, that was like the guy, right?
Okay.
And then around, you know that he's not with us, he's dead, right? So you're like, okay, who's going to be the next guy? It was almost like we were all waiting, like, when is the next Messiah going to come?
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember being in my mom's car, and we were driving. We used to go like to a roller skating rink or something, like on Tuesdays or whatever, and we're driving to this rink, and I hear, I guess it was "You Really Got Me." I think that was it, and hearing those harmonies, the thing that really kind of blew me away was the sound of it, but also those vocals. Like, it's like a Beach Boys kind of thing. Like, just to me, maybe it was the reverb and the way they were mixed, but I almost felt like that's almost like a synthesizer or something. It didn't sound like Beach Boys harmonies. It sounded like something that was just like this, like the car horn in
Right.
Running with the Devil.
Yeah.
How it just had that, kind of like precision that I hadn't heard before. And then getting that record, getting the first Van Halen record, and just listening to it. And I've got my little Gibson the Paul, and I've got a Fender amp, kind of like that Silverface Fender over there, and a Distortion Plus. And I'm listening to this Van Halen thing, and I don't know what the hell this guy's doing, but it just sounds like he's just going ape shit. So I know I gotta, like, go over to the amp, crank the gain, and just start trying to play as fast and run. I'm just trying to, like, imagine it, because I mean, back then, dude, there was no tabs, there was no videos, there was nothing. All you had was your imagination and that album, and you put the needle on it and just go, I don't know what the hell this guy's doing, but whatever it is, you try to capture that feeling.
Right. Right. It was he definitely, there was definitely a feeling that happened when you hear the opening chords to "You Really Got Me." Like somebody, a lot of people say "punch in the gut." It's sort of like
Yeah,
just, yeah. And the background vocals, you're right. They had such cut. When,
yeah,
they were, and like you said, it was sort of like, I know you talked to Steve Rosen, the whole thing with Ted Templeman and the whole melding of the vocals into this rock thing that kind of made them really unique, over the
yeah,
over the period of all the different bands that came after, they stuck out because they had such great background vocals and vocals.
Yeah. Yeah. It gave them a pop sheen to
Yes,
their hard rock.
absolutely. Yeah. So you remember the first time you ever saw the band?
The first time I ever saw them live was not until the 5150 tour.
Okay. 86. Yeah.
And yeah, 86 at Hampton Coliseum. And Eddie with his parachute pants and his tank top, right? That was just, it seemed like he might have worn the same thing on the whole tour, because every picture I've ever seen of that tour, it looks like he's wearing that same kind of outfit. But I remember going, Reggie Wooten went with us,
Yeah.
and me and a couple other guys from college. And I mean, Reggie was blown away. I was blown away to hear it in person, even though it was different than now when you go back and see the bootlegs of 78, some of that stuff that popped up on YouTube, and you hear the energy that they were putting out then. It's a little bit more refined. Edward Van Halen, by the time of the 5150 thing. I still personally prefer the raw kinetic energy of the 78, 79, 80, 81 type
Sure.
era.
Sure.
But there's so little footage and no professional footage from that time period. So, I mean, Live Without a Net is one of the, when everybody watches Eruption now and reactions to Eruption, it's all Live Without a Net.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was that show. That's what I saw. Everything in that video was, when I watched Live with a Net after it, I was like, man, that's exactly what I saw. Of course, there's little variations in each show, but I remember Sammy talking about Alex Van Halen when he introduced him and said, this mother back here has got he's got 12 tall cans of Schlitz malt liquor, and it's all the back room or something like that. I remember him saying something like that.
That's wild. That footage. Yeah. It's actually become like the iconic footage of Eddie Van Halen, doing a solo.
Yeah.
They did it when I went to the Met, I think it was. And then they did it when at another Van Halen event. Let's say I went to the Smithsonian, but when I went to the Met and also went to the Hall of Fame, they have that footage plan of that, and
that's all they got.
Right. That's the best footage of him doing his solo, which is an amazing solo, really, with all the different things he does in it. So it's really cool. But what I got to see is a bunch of kids, like when this was at the Met. So this was like at the big museum. So people that were coming through weren't necessarily coming for the guitar exhibition. Yeah. They were just coming through. So they came in and they were watching Van Halen for the first time, Yeah. So it was cool to see these kids to experience it for the first time. Again, like I did, like you did. We're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because we get, as we get down the line, you got your Alan Holdsworth and whatever, and we get so kind of just used to that level of playing, but then we forget what it was like to see that for the first time.
Yeah. And we were listening to Holdsworth at that time. We were listening to Yngwie at that time, and I used to hang out with Reggie Wooten, and he would ask me, who do you listen to? And so I hipped him to Yngwie. We had gone to see Yngwie. I don't remember if the Yngwie tour was before with Iron Maiden. Was that before the 5150 tour? It may have been.
Probably been, yeah, because Yngwie was first big tour was probably 84 in the States.
So we had
as a solo guy.
We had gone to see that, and we loved that, right? Mm-hmm. And then and we had, some of us, I didn't quite make it till the end, but we had tried to go see the Eat 'Em and Smile band with David Lee Roth and Steve Vai and all that. So I had gotten all those guys listening to all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then when Van Halen came through with Sammy Hagar, that sort of energized people to, okay, now let's go see Edward Van Halen. And even though we had heard all of that stuff, and even though Reggie could play Alan Holdsworth. He used to play Three Sheets to the Wind and this kind of stuff back then. He was still left the Van Halen concert going, oh man, he was doing all, he was doing that, that Holdsworth kind of thing. He was doing this legato runs and just the tone of it and just the whole presentation. You were still in awe, even though you had all that other stuff after the fact.
Yeah, you think about that, the tapping that's all through that, when he's doing all the dual hand tapping that Steve Violator did on building the church and all that stuff. We're on top of the fretboard. He was doing all that, in '86, pretty at the top of his game at that point with that.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing thing to see. And then, it just, there were so many things in that '86 solo that it's just like the library of his greatest hits.
Greatest solo hits all combined.
Yeah. It's like 20 minutes of that.
And refined to the point where it is, that it is a great solo because it does take you through all those different things. And it's a blueprint. But, we used to talk about back in the day when I'd hang out with Reg, he's like, man, all you got to get is one solo. You just need one solo. And we knew that if I could just come up with an eruption, if I could just come up with a thing, but that's what you need. Of course you got to be in the right band and the right situation and all that, but trying to come up with that piece of music, I think I'd have an easier time doing it now than I did when I was a kid, and I could run up and down the fretboard, but my organizational skills and my thought process of, hey, let's build this and let's put this here and do that there. It just didn't seem like you could really do it,
Yeah, that you went to GIT as well, and that's something I didn't go, but I was accepted and almost went in '89. I think it was. I was supposed to go. I didn't actually make the move that you made to LA. I backed out and never left. But that whole time with all those folks that you went out and worked, nonstop with all these guys. What was that like with the Van Halen? The whole thing was blowing up with Yngwie, Van Halen, George Lynch, all these different people. What was the culture like in the school at that time?
Well, I think when I got there, it was late '86, early '87, and that was maybe the peak of the gold rush, of everybody kind of catching on. It was a gold rush to try to go out there and be the next guy. Now, I was just a kid from Virginia. I didn't know how to style my hair and get perms, and I didn't have hip clothes or any of that. But there would be guys that would show up for school with the full teased out hair, bandana, wristbands and jewelry and cowboy boots and all this kind of stuff. And I remember one day, the first day of school, there was this one kid from Germany. His name was Klaus. Whatever happened to Klaus, I don't know, but Klaus posted up in one of the they had these cubicles where you could practice, right?
Right.
And he posted up in a cubicle, and they had these PV, I don't know if they were bandits or whatever they had in those practice rooms. There were these little practice amps, and he's in there and he's got the bandit dimed, all the gain, everything cranked. And he's standing in the doorway of the room, and he's propping the door open, and he's just playing as fast as he can, trying to impress everybody. And it's my thought process was dude, we're here to learn.
Right.
And it didn't impress me, right. But maybe there were people that thought it was great, but it was kind of do that at an audition or do that on the Sunset Strip. This is a place where there's people of all different levels
Right.
here
Right.
to play. And there was a lot of people that, I mean, I would see guys that would get full guitar tattooed, like their whole arm like a tattoo, and I'm like, and then they're struggling to play like some simple thing, and I'm kind of like going, it's putting the cart before the horse. Like,
Yeah.
get that shit down before you start marking your skin. I
Right.
mean, there was a lot of kind of stuff like that. I mean, LA had its thing that people would call posers,
Right.
and so a lot of people did place a lot of emphasis on the look and the style.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, that is important.
Sure.
I see now I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a YouTube channel where they get like 10 musicians.
Oh, I've seen it. Jared Dines.
No, not
No?
Jared Dines. This is a different one.
Okay.
Jared Dines gets the YouTuber guys. But
Okay.
this one is just like he's, I don't know, Ohio or Chicago or somewhere,
Yeah.
and he gets 10 musicians, and they get to pick one band leader, and he picks, and then they have to learn a cover song and then like make it their own or something.
Right.
And I'm looking at the choices of the 10 guys, and I'm like, if this was the Sunset Strip, none of you would get picked, because you guys all look like absolute right? I mean, there is that element. First, you do have to have somebody that can play. You've got to be able to play, otherwise, you're a poser.
Right.
But people would put so much, effort into the look.
Right.
Now I see people putting no effort into it.
Right.
So
right.
could we get somewhere in the middle with all this?
Right. Isn't it crazy how it's shifted in the last few years? I've noticed that too in the different clubs around here. It's just like, I'm still always doing what I've been doing, but there's that thing that happens when somebody gets really hot where everybody emulates that thing. It's the same thing that happened in the 80s. We were there, we saw how once Van Halen kind of hit, everybody around that became hot. And it became the clones, the sort of clone wars.
Everybody was hoping to become the next Edward Van Halen or George Lynch or Yngwie.
Right.
And you had the different, and even before that, when I went to Berkeley for a summer,
okay,
there was one kid who had I think he had a Charvel and a Marshall stack, and he had permed hair and a Floyd Rose, before everybody else. And it's like, this guy's like, figured whatever it was. And that was probably like 83.
Okay.
So, but you figure LA, dude, it was all Charvels, Jacksons, Marshall stacks, that whole Sunset Strip thing had permeated the school, even though the school had some of the best jazz guitar players and funk and blues and country and all these other like stuff that you could learn.
Right.
The school was just tons of dudes wanting to be the next Edward Van Halen.
Yeah. So the Tommy Tedesco's and that kind of stuff are kind of, even though he was one of like the early guys there, you had Paul Gilbert in there and all.
Yeah.
Because
and Paul Gilbert was a very popular teacher, and for good reason. And look, man, my thing was this. I went and saw Racer X at the Troubadour.
Mm-hmm.
And the night I was there, the rumor was that David Lee Roth, Steve Vai, and Billy Sheehan were up in the wings watching the show. And I remember going and seeing that show and seeing how fast he played, and he pulled out the drill with the picks and doing this. And I just said to myself, I said, man, you're not going to outspeed this guy.
Right.
It's like you're not going to outdo these guys. So I immediately said, okay, I need to focus on learning other types of music. Not that I'm gonna not play hard rock, because I'm still gonna play rock and roll, but
Right.
I need to be able to. I wonder if most, and I knew for a fact most of those rock guys that were showing up in the cowboy boots and the bandanas and the teased out hair. I go, those guys can't play in the jazz lab at all. Those guys are not even trying to do that.
Right.
So it's like if you've got a battle a guitar player that's super shreddy and he's just shredding all over the place.
Hmm.
Well, then you're gonna go and you're gonna play slow and you're gonna play with intensity
Right.
and feeling, or you're gonna play more intelligent, because you can't beat a man at his own game.
Right. His specialty. Yeah. There was a lot of that specialty kind of. I kind of look at lead guitar players and particularly shreddy guitar players as sort of a specialty thing. Like
Yeah,
it was a specialty. Now, if you, like you said, if you go out and try to learn all these different styles, I mean, I got into the other things after the '90s because my focus as a specialty was that. But then I started to play with older guys.
yeah,
And then I learned all of the old classics from the '50s, the My
yeah,
Girls and the
yeah,
Unchained Melodies and all those things that you would do
yeah,
like you would do a wedding gig you talk
yeah,
about, or
yeah,
those gigs. So I learned all those things in a 10-year stint of a house gig, just doing it every weekend
yeah,
and just watching guys, learning
yeah,
from them on stage a
yeah,
lot of times. Yeah. So Eddie, when he was a kid, he's sort of like I guess I always say this on here, but I guess I didn't realize, like, because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any way to know that Eddie Van Halen was holed up in his room for until later on, of course, when he became
yeah.
popular. So as kids, we're doing almost exactly the same thing as he did, but we didn't really realize that this is what he did. I mean, did you feel that, like surprised by that a little bit?
Well, I think the difference is I think we were all doing that. I think all young guitar players, especially from that, from Eddie's time and our time, we all holed up in our room and practiced and played along the records and all that. But one thing that the West Coast guys had advantage over guys like us who are either in Virginia or Tennessee, or maybe if you're in Texas or if you're in Wisconsin or wherever, is they had so many guitar players out there in LA. So he was able to see guys, big time concerts, tons of Marshall heads all over the place. Dude, when I was out there, I mean, you could, for $500, you could have bought 5 or 6 plexis, 500 bucks a pop. And so there was all that stuff out there. And then you've got, Steve Lukather in his side of town, and you got Eddie over in his, and some of the other, West Coast guy, George Lynch
Yeah.
and Randy Rhoads. And you've got these guys had an advantage because they were there, and they had that access, one, to maybe seeing more concerts and things than we see, other players that they could learn from, music teachers like Eddie had his college professor that he learned some things from,
Right.
his piano lessons,
Hmm.
all of that. And then, of course, his dad being a musician, his brother playing drums and playing with his dad, playing swing, which is
Right.
one thing that people note about Eddie's playing. And Van Halen was, Hot for Teacher and songs like that. That's a swing feel,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so
It's very difficult from a perspective of somebody. Like, I always felt like I was more, I don't know, naturally inclined to play like a Lynch riff, a George
yeah,
Lynch style riff, than I was
yeah,
to play the swing of Eddie Van
yeah,
Halen. I always felt like it was harder for me to
yeah,
embody that swing.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like playing, like, say, it is hard for a rock player to try to play jazz because it is a different time feel, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And so, but those guys had that swing thing sort of embedded in them from, I mean, their dad's playing clarinet and playing, that kind of music, big band music and stuff. And Alex is playing those gigs, and it gets ingrained in your thing. So, when you think of like a song like "I'm the One,"
Mm-hmm.
or you think of "Hot for Teacher," but I'd say even more so, "I'm the One." "I'm the One" is almost like a bebop, fast Charlie Parker, that I'm going to take your head off sort of thing. Like you play those up tempo swings. It's the hardest thing to do is swing at a fast tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Most guys that dabble in jazz will be, hey man, not too fast, because it gets harder to have that time feel and make it swing. And Eddie could swing, the hell out of it. And
Yeah,
that's one thing that a lot of the other Sunset Strip, I don't know any other Sunset Strip player or rock player since, before or since, that swung that hard.
sure. Yeah, that song in particular, I was asked, if I was to let somebody listen to one Van Halen song that if they'd never heard Van Halen, which one would it be? And I said, "I'm the One." And I had a singer in one of my bands that I was like, she's younger, so I was like trying to introduce her to these more deep cut Van Halen songs.
Yeah.
And I let her listen to "I'm the One" because of that breakdown with the vocals. I thought, what a great vocal,
Yeah. Yeah.
example for a singer to hear that. And she was pretty impressed. It's a pretty impressive
Yeah.
song, man. It blows your mind.
It still, I think, would blow most people's minds that there is no atomic kinetic music being created like that now.
Right, right. I agree.
And it could be, but maybe this is tying back to the thing talking about this band. And I go, none of these guys would be in the band. I mean, there's an athletic nature to what Van Halen did. Eddie might not have been an athlete, although I heard he could play basketball pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly, Alex had to be in some semblance of shape to be able to physically play drums like that and swing like that. David Lee Roth was a acrobat, an athlete, a martial artist. These guys, at least those three, were very serious, about their physical condition, even though they were partying a little bit, even though they were, doing whatever they were doing on their, between sets or whatever. I've heard that David Lee Roth would stretch for hours before shows.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
Nobody has that kind of discipline anymore.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that whole band and their work ethic was one of the things that is, over all the different interviews that I've done that's really stood out. If we go back, let's go. I want to ask you this about Steve Rosen's book because you've read it, and I did the whole audio book thing too, like you did, and of course the interviews that are with that. You in your thing that I just listened to today about Fame in your video, if you guys need to check out his videos, all these different videos that Brad makes, because they're really cool and insightful. You were talking about Fame and how it can take you on a ride. And for Eddie Van Halen, this took him on a ride that didn't necessarily agree with him as far as what I can find out from people like Steve, or even in those interviews when you listen to him talk about things. What was your impression of how he handled Fame and the whole situation through that book?
I think that from my perspective that he handled it through isolation. Eddie, Eddie was a guy that grew up where his dad would give him a cigarette and a drink when he was a kid and he was nervous.
Right.
So he learned at an early age to quell any feelings that he had through things.
Right. Sure.
Eddie is a guy, a reluctant rock star. He doesn't. He didn't want to have to dress. I'm sure those outfits that he wore when David Lee Roth was in the band was probably Dave's ideas. They probably had a costume, girl who put
Yeah,
some
yeah,
looks together for him and stuff.
yeah.
Because
She was just on here, Fleur. That was the girl.
okay,
To the my last guest. Yeah.
so left to his own devices, and just shown up like he was to play an early Mammoth gig, you
Right,
know.
right, right.
And so and that's one of the things that I credit Dave for is making it into a marketable thing. But the fact that he would isolate, you hear stories about him partying with Steve Lukather, so you can imagine they're up at 5150, they're partying, and Eddie says to Steve, well, I bet you want to go to the Rainbow now, which is like what any red-blooded male would probably want to do. Steve goes, no, I just want to hang out with you. And Eddie's like, yeah, I don't want, Eddie wasn't the guy that wanted to be seen at the Rainbow.
Yeah.
All the hundreds of times that I went to the Rainbow, I never saw Edward Van Halen. I saw David Lee Roth a bunch. I saw Lemmy almost every time I went to the Rainbow.
I saw it there too.
I saw Entwistle there a shit ton, and tons of other people.
Right.
But Eddie would be holed up in that studio, experimenting and doing, and then how do you keep working for days and days on end? Well, back in the day, that's how they did it. So I've heard stories about Roth saying, knocking on his door on the road and say, come on, man, let's go roller skating, or let's get out, let's get some fresh air. And Eddie would be sleeping it off. And Dave would tell him, you're not living right, man. You're not living right. You got to have balance,
Mm-hmm.
and that's to his, detriment, is that he didn't need to be around people. He didn't need fame, but he also didn't know how to cope. And that's why he had to do what he did.
Right. So you had mentioned this in your just last video, how there's sort of unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen in the business once you do achieve any fame. And in this case, it kind of was a rocket ride, right? So, I think that, if we read that book and listen to what he says in it, in the audiobook, you realize his primary motivation was his family, to take care of his family, take care of his dad and mom, which I thought was, an amazing tribute to his father and his mother, and how much they wanted to take care of their family, and how much that coming here with, coming to the United States as immigrants was so tough on them.
Yeah.
And how little they had, and how much this was so important to them. But then when they get it all of a sudden it becomes this other two-headed monster that you allude to in your last video that I just watched.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody thinks about that. And that's a big part of why I do the channel that I'm doing, is now realizing that even when you get those opportunities to go play those arenas and stuff, I mean, my experience was I ended up realizing I like playing a dive bar better than for playing for 20,000 people in a giant arena. It's just way more personal connection. You're not so separated, and you don't feel like this empty void when you're done. And imagine Eddie could never really play small clubs ever again. They were a arena band, and besides going and jamming a few times with people, that was his only experience, going out there, giving every ounce of your being, and then going back to a silent hotel room. And from all accounts, Eddie would just continue partying and playing his guitar through the night.
Yeah, I never slept.
But not knowing how to wind down and handle all of that.
Right. Isn't that the biggest? I mean, that's the thing that we see most from most people that fall apart or die on the road, is this thing where you have this rush of excitement and what you're doing your thing, and then there's dead time forever.
Yeah.
You mostly dead time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man, it's the hardest thing to do, is come down from a stage high. Now, you imagine a guy like David Lee Roth, would
Mhm.
be on cloud nine, and he would throw these magnanimous parties after the shows, the legendary parties that you'd hear about,
Right, right.
and they'd probably be midgets and farm animals and models and actresses and all this kind of stuff. And
Chimpanzees.
or
There was a chimpanzee. According to my last guest, we had a chimpanzee involved.
okay, so there's all this stuff going on, but then Eddie absolutely hates it.
Right.
He doesn't feel comfortable in that, and he just wants to go hide, go back to the room and hide.
Yeah. He
And
was like
it's
that. He
just
was like that, like at NAM too. I went to NAM all through the '80s, and around my senior year was '87, so I went to NAM the first time then, and I kind of experienced what it was like for him at his peak. When I would see him at the events and how crazy that was
yeah,
around him at that time, and he was always. I don't want to say he was reluctant to be there, but he was not comfortable in
yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of crazy
yeah.
fan filled environment.
Yeah, that's going. I was never comfortable going to those kind of shows. Going and there's the guys that would go and they plug into whatever amp is there. And back then, when you could play,
Right.
guys would go and try to get discovered at NAM. So it's like play something to impress everyone.
Right.
I to me that's like the hardest
Right.
thing to do.
Right.
It's I think I'd probably do it better now than I could when I was 20. I just I'm like, well, what
Right.
but and I think Eddie felt this weight of being the guy
Right.
and being expected to perform all the time. And the NAM shows, I mean, there's tons of musicians there, all kinds of different styles of players, and some of
Right.
them incredible, and
Right.
some of them, just trying to be,
Right.
but
Right.
it's tough to be the king, man. It's tough.
I tell you what, going to NAM in '87 though was the eye opener for me. Like probably when you first went to Los Angeles, like, wow, there is this many guitar players.
Oh yeah,
Right. They're
dude.
all great.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I need to go back home and work some more.
Dude, that I mean that's the reality is it's kind of like Nashville now. There's
Yeah.
you could go down the lower Broadway and probably count up 100 guitar players in a 3-hour shift, you know but it's different. It's different now, that scene. Everybody wanted to, the hardest thing to realize was it didn't matter if you could play all of Eddie's licks or you could had your own incredible licks and stuff like that. You still needed a song, and you needed a fucking great band, and your singer had to be incredible. And
Right.
if you didn't have all of those things put together, it didn't matter how damn good you were, because that was the thing that got Edward to the masses, was having this band, having this front man that could sell it, go out there and sell it, while Eddie, kind of is in his own world. Dave is out front of the band, selling the band and making sure everybody looks good and it's an incredible performance and energy and all of that. And without all those things, man, it's just empty chops, you
Right.
know?
Right. Right. It was a perfect vehicle for us to hear those incredible chops.
Yeah.
If we didn't have those songs wrapped in all of that other stuff, we would probably, I don't know whether we would know, or we would, it would have been a lot smaller for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
how many people are like that we know?
I know guys. I knew a kid when I was, before I moved to LA, and I was probably 17 or 18, and he was like 13, and he could play the most mind-blowing solos. He was a guy that did have his written out solo, and he did play this incredible stuff that was really beyond a lot of the LA cats. But he was in Virginia. He didn't move, from where he was, and
Right.
maybe he didn't get the right band and get the right song and build the right scene and all of that. And so he's not a guy that's became a household name. So there were great guitar players on the scene, but Van Halen was the perfect storm.
Right. Well, if you compare it to Yngwie's career, which we know, what that was like. That's a very much again specialized for people that love it, like you and I. I'm sure it's just wonderful to watch too, to see it live.
Yeah.
But you have to appreciate that. Whereas when you wrapped it in Panama or Jump,
Yeah.
everybody could appreciate
Yeah.
Eddie Van
My
Halen.
4-year old can listen to Jump
Right.
and run around the house. She loves it.
It's just,
I don't think if I played her I Am a Viking that she would have the same response.
right. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing when you look at somebody like Yngwie, then you look at somebody like George Lynch, who was kind of almost to the pop thing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
almost got there, and then
Yeah.
Eddie
Yeah. My
just
daughter likes Dokken. She does like
okay. There
Dokken.
you go. What
So
song does she like?
she liked The Hunter.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a
Great
good one.
solo, great guitar solo.
She would be running around the house singing The Hunter.
We did a cover of that one in one of the bands I was in, so it was fun to redo that one.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
Lynch. Too, you said earlier, you're going from Hendrix to the next guy. So I was kind of like, after I'd seen Van Halen, I was like, this is still back early. It was
Yeah.
easy to discover people, but I thought there's got to be another guy like this, a little something that has this tone.
Yeah.
And then I saw Breaking the Chains video, and I thought, there's that sound again. What is that sound?
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
Marshall thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've been a lifelong fan of his too, just because of that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
thing.
He is he's the last of the Mohicans of those first generation LA, hard rock, guys. And he's the last guy, and he's still doing it. And he's still playing with a lot of fire.
Right.
And
right.
he plays off the cuff is what I like about George Lynch.
Right.
He's just up there. He does his thing, man, and he's going to play whatever the hell he wants, and I love it.
Yeah, he has that the thing that I always loved, which was that didn't feel as rehearsed or as scripted, and that you might get something even better than what you
Yeah.
expected. I ran across somebody let me listen to some outtake of Mean Streets, which I'd never heard, and I don't know
Yeah.
where it's at, and if I'll ever hear it again. But I heard a new solo that he cut, and I was like, "Oh my God, that was as good as the one that I've known for my entire
Yeah.
life." And it was totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing with Lynch. He could play whatever solo and then just blow you away with something totally new off the cuff.
Yeah. That's the magic of going back to Hendrix and all of those guys. The reason why you'd go see multiple shows is because you get new information than just what's on the record. And that's going away from music now because of all the click tracks and backing tracks and all
Right.
the technology that makes shows perfect,
Right.
but less real.
Yeah, it's really hard because I'm working on some demos right now for a project that we're doing. And when you put it across an iPhone, you feel disadvantaged already. Like the quality is going to be crap. No, and if like everybody's kind of forced into this, do we tune it or not tune it? Because everybody tunes it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They tune people that can sing now.
I know, of course.
Because they're trying to fit into that thing. Younger people that only listen to pop music, they don't like to hear the sound of an untuned vocal
Right.
because they're so used to hearing a tuned vocal. I can't stand to listen to the sound of a tuned vocal.
Because you can hear it. Yeah. You
Yeah,
can
I
hear
hear
it. But they're so used to hearing it that they
Yeah.
don't like it.
I want to hear the variances of pitch.
Right,
I want to
right.
hear when he's sliding up to that note and almost not quite making it. That's what pulls your heartstrings. That's what the same thing with a bent note, bending up to it and maybe pushing it a little bit. Like Jeff Beck would play a little bit sharp sometimes intentionally,
Right.
But
Or even when Ed would play like those overbends and stuff.
yeah,
Just
Yeah.
really, really, and then depending on the vibrato at this point, on a guitar, or even a singer that has great or wide vibrato, a tuner on it just gets crazy.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
almost impossible to even sound human. You can't even fix it.
Yeah. They
It
don't
c-
want it. They don't want you to sound human anymore, man.
that's true. Your channel, man. I love about your channel is you do a lot of different, different discussions about a lot of different music issues. And so, what got you down, thinking about, sharing all that information with people that are younger, or what do you think that they're thinking when they watch you?
Well, here's the thing, man. The demographics
Yeah.
largely skew in our age group.
Okay.
So I'm realizing I'm probably preaching largely to the choir,
Right. Right.
but I do have younger guys that tune in, and the ones that do tune in, they go, "Oh man, I need to know, I need to hear this stuff because we could be saving a lot of people a lot of trouble."
Right.
If but here's the thing, man, and you probably know this if you've ever had to. I mean, you've had younger people in your bands and stuff like that.
Yep.
They largely have to learn the hard way, unfortunately.
Right.
You can tell them, look, this is what you need to do, and if you do this, you'll be successful, or you'll learn the song, or you do that, and they largely don't listen. It's got to be their way, and so you have to just kind of go, all right,
Right.
and you sit back and you watch the train wreck, because I don't know what that is, man, but my experience, I've been hired in the past to try to coach singers,
Yeah.
to try to teach them how to be a front man. And not that I was ever necessarily a front man, but I certainly knew what they needed to do. I studied David Lee Roth. I studied Elvis. I still watch performances and try to learn things.
Sure.
And you try to go, okay, here's what we're going to do. The band's going to start the tune. You're going to come walking from off stage. You're going to come out front. You're going to grab the microphone. You're going to sing a couple lines in center stage. Now we're going to go over to stage left. You're going to work the front of stage left. Boom. Now we're going to go back to the middle. You're going to do something like this. Now we're going to go stage right, and you're going to work stage right. And we made it one rehearsal of that, and they said, I don't want to do that. I that's not what I do. And
Right.
I'm thinking, well, okay, so you just want to come out there, sing, and think everyone's going to just give you the world. Because essentially, if you're not out there working the crowd, I mean, not even eye contact or anything, then you're not fully developed as a performer. And they largely, in my experience, they don't listen. So what can you do at that point? At that point, we're doing a YouTube channel where we're preaching to the choir and we're sharing this knowledge that we've learned. And if the young people that listen to it get something from it, then dude, you're ahead of the game.
Exactly. That's one of the girls I work with all the time. Her parents really brought her up from a young age, about 8, 9 years old, when she started having her first, inkling of being a singer. And the whole time, she's very cognizant of learning from her elders, from her parents, and understanding that they're only trying to help you so that you don't have to go through that train wreck, like you
Yeah.
said a minute ago, right? So you can skip that step. We're actually trying to help you skip the steps,
Yeah.
the things that if you would just do simple things,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's golden, right?
As a guitar player, focusing maybe less on this. I hate that I'm having to say that, but maybe focus less on this and focus more on this or this or promotion or networking or marketing. then you won't be that guy that's in his bedroom with just incredible chops,
Yeah.
but then nobody knows who you are. And you might be able to take off via social media, but you still got to market if you're doing that.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting ways that people have marketed themselves as musicians. Like these bands that will do. I've been watching some of these bands do these promo videos. Well, they'll do a promo video of them performing live. I don't know how live it is. It's probably fixed, but the bottom line is they're getting a great video together of them doing a great cover, and they'll do series of these covers, like some sort of you know different artists, but in the same genre, maybe yacht rock or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'll put out this presence for a while online for maybe a number of years as this performing entity online, and a lot of these people end up actually going out on tours and doing tours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very a very backward kind of
Yeah.
way of working
Yeah.
your way onto the stage
Yeah.
that way, but they're probably all already great players. This
Yeah.
was just a new marketing technique.
Yeah, yeah, there is that. But I see guys that maybe all they do is
Right,
shred.
right,
They don't even play songs.
right, right,
And I go, well, man, when's the tendonitis going to get?
right, because it will.
I
Uh,
people they were back in the day in the late 80s when I was at GIT. There
yeah,
was literally like hand specialists that were advertising at the school because kids were injuring their hands by
sure.
doing too much sweet picking and all this kind of stuff.
Well, Eddie had problems with his hands later in
Oh, I
life.
did not know that.
Yeah, he couldn't get, they had to have, I think he had to have maybe some surgeries on his hands that he
Wow.
had later in life. And I think he got it straightened out. But,
Yeah.
when you start having some tendonitis or something in your pinky or something you can't stretch like you used to,
Yeah.
it becomes like,
Yeah.
how am I going to get around this now?
Yeah. The ice cream man solo,
All
right?
right. That blows your
I'm
hand.
not even going to try to play that. I'm not even. I used to mess with it a little bit. I'm not. I don't want to injure myself, so I'm just going to leave that one right where it sits.
So the other albums of Van Halen, early albums, which ones did you prefer? You like Fair Warning like everybody, or
Um. Yeah, I would say probably Van Halen 1 first. I might go 2 next,
Mhm.
and then probably Fair Warning, and then I would probably put Women and Children first last.
Okay.
So that leaves
80.
1984, which I feel like I've called 1984. That's a victory lap album.
Okay.
That's a victory lap. It's a great album, but I don't feel like it's as kinetic, and it's different. It's got the electronic drums, and it's a more produced kind of thing.
Do you prefer Diver Down to it?
I prefer Diver Down, actually, especially now, just because it's a little less overplayed
Yeah.
than Panama and Jump and Hot for Teacher. We've all heard that a million times.
Sure.
But as far as guitar playing goes, it's hard to top the first album.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. I actually, my first album was by accident, was Diver Down, because I went in thinking it was this video that I saw, on Don Kirshner's rock concert, the 81 video, right? So I go in, I'm looking for the album, I flip it over, and it's got pictures of the same concert. And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
it's got to
yeah,
be that right album. So I buy the album. Of course, it's not Unchained. It's Diver Down.
yeah,
And I hear,
yeah,
but I hear that intro to Where Have All the Good Times Gone, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, it kind of
yeah,
fades in and hits. It's like
yeah,
pretty, still
yeah,
pretty killer. I mean,
yeah, yeah. Great production on that album, and you got little guitars on there, and you with the acoustic, intro on that, and
right, right,
I think that's a really, really underrated Van Halen album. You know,
right, right. You know, this wall that you did. This is how long ago did you do this? This is
maybe it's been 4 or 5 months, something like that.
you did a video on that, right? You did like
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
building.
The whole process. It was a last minute thing. My wife had planned for the guy to come in and just do some, I don't know, some kind of, wall thing or whatever. and when the art guy came here, I said, "Hey, man, this thing that they're trying to do, it doesn't really fit what I'm doing with this room, and this is my where I shoot my videos and stuff." I said, "Here's what I want to do. I want to do stealth, black wall, some crisscross lines going across,
Right.
just not any trademark."
Right.
So, well, I've changed what because she had wanted some pattern that would have been like some 70s thing where these V's going across, like some 70s bedroom or something like that.
I got you.
And I was like, no, it's got to be something that can work with the channel. And it's very stealth. When I normally shoot my videos, I turn the lights out. I'm the walls behind me, and there's mood lighting, and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, the YouTube thing is pretty, for you to jump off your career in the business. What made you decide to just like cold turkey your live stuff, or have you? I don't know.
I completely cold turkeyed as since I haven't played a gig since I left Nashville.
Okay.
And part of that is we had to come down here. My wife got a job opportunity that she just couldn't turn down.
Right.
And it just so happened that I had started working and building the YouTube channel. So then I realized, oh shit, this is going to have to be it. This is going to have to be what I build something out of.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just started, focusing really hard on it and figuring out, it's throw spaghetti at the wall, man, and see what sticks. And so every now and then I do demos. I do my daily, I put out a new video every morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've got a treasure trove of videos that I've stockpiled. So if I go down for a couple of weeks or whatever, I could still put out a new video each day. And I just like, this has to work because my wife threatened me with having to get a job. And I'm like, I don't want to work for anybody else. But here's the other side. The gigs down here don't pay what I was getting paid up in Nashville. Okay. I got to the point where every weekend I could at least make $500 just going and doing, one corporate gig. And if I did a double, I'd make $1,000. So, that's decent money, and we have got a 4-year-old. So I'm like juggling that and driving to school and, doing all that stuff. So this just had to work. I had to like just grind on it and literally every day monitoring how many views I'm getting, looking at the earnings and going, okay, I need to make more. I'll tell you what, today at last minute, 2 p.m. video, I'll literally fire the torpedoes, and I'll literally cast one out. And here's the thing, man. Sometimes I'll have something in the reserve tank and I'll put it out and it'll do really good. And I had no idea, just been sitting there.
Right.
Like I had this thing in the tank and now it's doing something. We're not talking huge numbers. We're not talking tons of money.
Right.
But if I see that it keeps going up, like you said, you'll be surprised at what happens. So I just figure keep on the path, keep knocking, keep working on it each day. Mm-hmm. And it gets, get a little better each day and gain a few subscribers each day. And that's the plan.
And it's really, it's incredible how you've done. You're only, you really focused only just over a year, right?
It's focused on it maybe about a year and a couple months.
Okay. Cause yeah, I mean, you said earlier, maybe off camera that I had commented early on, and I remember watching that thinking, yeah, this is some good content, cause of course I connected with it, but I just thought, your style was going to really work. Because it's real hard. Like I said, it's real hard to come off authentic, on these walk and talks or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm just hanging out with you at the track.
Yeah, it's kind of what it is, and
But
I just
yeah,
have to get myself worked up for the good ones. Some of them, you go out there and I sometimes I won't even have a topic. I'll just go out there, hit record, walk down the trail with this thing, and I'll start commenting on it. But the best ones are when something's either fired me up or something's happened or something that like the one today. I had seen the girl talking about, oh, I was just playing for 21,000 people, and these people don't know. And that something like that just kind of sets me off to where I can go and
yeah,
let
right,
me let me riff on this. And it ended up being like a 26-minute riff on fame.
right.
I hadn't any plan of what I was going to say, but the thoughts start flowing, and it's like, as it unfolds, it starts going in different directions, like our conversation right here.
Yeah, yeah. It's all
And
about
you
this
just try to,
get in the zone, and then you're able to communicate that in a very direct, super honest way. Because I mean, this is what you're just thinking, and
yeah.
it's amazing all the videos that you put out. I mean, I got to tell you this, your thumbnails are awesome too.
I've been getting better at
Got
the
some sick
thumbnails.
thumbnails, bro. Because I look at them, I'm like, how do you do that? How do you do that thumbnail? That's pretty good.
I can't give away all my secrets, but I might give you a few hints.
Okay, yeah, thumbnails are important, and they're good stuff. You're doing good with that. It's really
Thanks,
cool,
man.
cool to see all that, and then all the different subject matter. That's the hard thing, is like to really hone in on a lot of because there's so many things you could talk about, and you've managed to kind of work those into nice form factors that anybody can really, and then they're funny. You're funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's ones where I just completely go for the humor. Like the other day, I did a thing on male enhancements, for 80s rockers. That I found that
I saw that. I saw that.
someone had commented that male singers in the 80s, there was only a couple guys that were doing those leather outfits for the hair bands,
Mhm.
and that some of the guys had slugs sewn into their region
Oh yeah.
to enhance their presence. And I was blown away when I saw that comment. I was like, I'll just hit record and I'll read that comment, and then I'll start talking about, these things. And of course the Spinal Tap thing. And what's funny is when that debuted and I premiered it that morning and the people were watching it, one of the guys in the comments goes, dude, I walked in on this singer in the 80s, and he was in the dressing room stuffing his pants with a sock.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it was a very real thing, but it's also hilarious.
Right. It's hard to, that's what's cool about you and I being around, is that we lived those times, and we can like relate the weird things about it, that like, the whole thing where you had three channels on your TV and you didn't have a remote control because there was no need for one.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just put it on whatever
yeah,
channel and you sat there
yeah,
and watch, and it was only 20 inches,
yeah,
big.
yeah,
It's like this little bitty box. I mean,
yeah,
those
yeah,
are such cool pieces of history that when we think about our parents, they're not doing podcasts, so they can't
yeah,
relate some of the
yeah.
things that were day to day for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that it gets to a point where the technology starts to get so advanced that I'm still playing catch up with
Right.
certain things. I'm still a caveman when it comes to recording audio. I don't tune, I don't quantize, I don't do any of that stuff. I just hit record, I can overdub, I can punch in, and it's a tape deck for me.
I was gonna say, you're not on a computer doing it.
I am on a computer, but I treat it like it's a tape
Tape
deck,
deck, right? Okay.
like an old 4 track. I know how to, I was good at using 4 tracks back in the day. So I just hit record, and I can pan, and I know how to put some plugins, put a reverb on it or whatever. But as far as any editing or stuff like that, I don't know how to do any of
I
that
have a
stuff.
bandmate who's still on one of those like rolling, VS
Yeah.
series or whatever. He's
Yeah,
still on
yeah.
one of those things. He still uses it. It sounds great,
Yeah.
but he doesn't know how to use a computer still.
Yeah.
He was
Wow.
always like that. It was always more about the songs writing than it was about any tech. So he was always more
Yeah.
into that part of it. But yeah, man, it's been great to have you on and talk to you live. And
Thank you, brother.
I just wish you the most luck on your new career.
Thank you, sir.
Tell your wife it will work out.
Yes.
It will work out.
And we'll let everybody know you're going to come on
I
my
am.
channel. We're going
I
to
am.
film that soon.
Yeah,
And
next week.
so we'll do a little cross pollination here and get
Yeah.
everybody to tune in to both of these channels, man, because your channel is absolutely amazing.
Thank you, brother. I've been so busy. I hadn't been able to do one since the Van Halen story since Fleur, and so I've been so busy with my project. But I was glad that I could get you on and get this going with you, man.
Yeah.
Because
Thank you so much, brother.
I had a couple of people talk to me about you and go, you know who Brad? I'm like, yeah, I know who he is. I watch his channel. Now they're going to be excited to know you're on my channel and I'm on your channel.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Awesome.
man.
Thank you, brother.
Get some food, man, and I'll talk to you soon. And
All right,
let
man.
let me know if you need anything. Okay.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Have a good one. All right.
You too.
Bye, man.